The fourth attempt is also the Crusaders. Ibn Jubayr says it's the year 578 after the Hijrah. He said, I arrived in Alexandria on the 29th of Dhul Hijjah, 578 after the Hijrah, during my excursion tour of Egypt. We left Alexandria on the 8th, right? And there we saw a huge crowd of people coming out of their homes, okay, to see Roman prisoners, Christian prisoners. And these prisoners were bought on animals facing the back of the animal. That's how you humiliate somebody. You know somebody's being humiliated in the old world, he's put to the back of the animal, okay? People were coming out, playing bugles, banging on sticks and things, just making a big, hoopla about this, okay? We inquired about them, and we were given a detailed picture of their crimes. All right, so what were the crimes of these people? The Christians of Syria had began to do all sorts of mischief, and they wanted to disrupt the Hajj, and they wanted to disrupt the city of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they succeeded on the first one by burning down the warehouse of food in Jeddah, that the pilgrims would come, collect their zad. Zad means sustenance, and keep going. They come from Jeddah, from the west, or from the north even, okay, northwest, collect their sustenance there, rest at Jeddah, and come down. They burn that down, okay, the storage of food, okay, and they killed and they fought, and there was all sorts of riots and all sorts of fighting. And then they headed towards Medina, okay, and when they were about 1 day away from Medina, okay, the famous Hajib al-Lu'lu' came with a few Moroccan youths who were experts, okay, in sea warfare and in fighting, and they were like their own version of their own Texas Rangers, like Texas Rangers, their own justice team basically, and they weren't part of any army; they were just on their own. They would protect the Muslims against the Christians, okay, and they fought with these Christians, and they took some as prisoners, okay, and the prisoners, when they were brought forth, they had admitted that their goal was to remove the body of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the sacred chamber. Okay, they admitted that after being caught, and so this team of Moroccans, Hajib al-Lu'lu', his name was, and this is almost like the Texas. In America we have they used to have the Texas Rangers, who were basically semi-official, and they could go around and make sure that gangsters were kept at bay. All right, and that's what this Moroccan group was. They would travel around, see who the Crusaders are bothering, and they would fight them. So Moroccans for the win. The fifth attempt. The fifth attempt is now by Shias again, and it's not against the Prophet directly, but it would have been an offense to the grave of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because a Shi'i ruler decided to remove Abu Bakr and Umar from next to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, and the head of the service personnel of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was Shamsuddin Sawab al-Lamti. He was a very gentle and kind person who had monitored the Prophet's mosque for decades. Okay, and he was essentially in charge of the buildings and grounds of the mosque of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so the ruler of Medina had accepted a bribe to allow a group of people to come in and remove Abu Bakr and Omar from the grave, the sacred chamber. So he received a letter. He said, you have been called to talk to the governor. He goes and talks to the governor. And he says to the governor says to him, some people are coming after Isha, when the mosque closes. When they come, you let them in and you don't say anything. You let them do whatever they need to do. Okay? He says, okay. He doesn't know what this is all about. Word spreads, one person to another, that something bad's going to happen in Medina. Okay? Something shady is being planned. Okay? So now Shamsuddin Thawab Al-Lamti is sitting waiting, and he knows that he's at the center of this. And he gets the knock on the door after Isha, and he's there and he's ready. He opens the door. Lo and behold, what does he see? He sees about 15 to 20 people carrying shovels and pickets and construction material. Okay? And he opens the door to them, and he can't do anything. They just march straight in. Okay? He doesn't know what they were going to do. But he now sees that they're going directly to the sacred chamber. And he says it was not 1 or 2 steps. When they were all in, that the earth quaked inside the mosque, and they were opened up, and they all fell deep in. I looked down, they fell so deep I couldn't see them anymore. And then the sand moved again, and they were completely buried, these people. He's sitting there, he can't believe his eyes. Shortly thereafter, the ruler comes by to investigate what's going on. And he said, what happened? He says to the ruler, some people came, didn't know who they were. The earth opened up and buried them all. The ruler says, think before you speak. How could this happen? He says, come. And he shows him the ditch. And of course, chandeliers are broken, lamps have fallen. It's like an earthquake scene, right? It's not like a clean opening. Okay, it's an earthquake scene. He says to him, don't utter a word about this. And the ruler goes around saying simply that it's an earthquake. An earthquake happened, and that's it. Okay. And so they start renovating the place. Right. Subhanallah. As-Samhudi says, Abu Muhammad Abdullah al-Mirghani has described this plot briefly in the history of Medina. Okay. Subhanallah. And he says that the 1520 were swallowed by the earth when they had only gone a few steps into the sacred chamber. وَيَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهُ. Okay, they were plotting, and yet Allah plots. What is the plot of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It is his punishment for those who plot. Okay, the one who openly does something, his punishment is going to be different than someone who plots. What's the difference? The one who openly comes out at you, you openly bring the response. The Crusaders came openly on the Muslims. Allah didn't bring a secret force to fight them. He brought an open force, Nuruddin, openly announcing it. So the makr of Allah, the plot of Allah, is that the punishment is unseen. You're brought an unseen plot. You hid your plot, so Allah hid his response. That's the difference between iqab, right? When the adl of Allah and the makr of Allah. The adl and the iqab of Allah is that it's open right in front of you, your punishment. Because he treats you as you treated him. You treated the rights of Allah and what is sacred in our religion and what is sacred in the sight of Allah openly, with open animosity. You will get an open pushback. You treat it and you try to plot secretly, likewise then Allah Ta'ala will put your punishment where you can't see it. That is the meaning of يَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهُ. وَلَا يَحِيقُ الْمَكْرُ السَّيِّئُ إِلَّا بِأَهْلِهِ. The plot of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala never comes except to those who are planning and plotting. So as long as you're an honest and open person, you should never imagine that Allah is going to trick you. And this the how do you know that that's not a plot? At this point, the waswas of people can go crazy. Well, how do I know that his telling me that he is not going to plot against me isn't a plot? So you're in a serious waswas, and you need to learn a very important thing, is that the word of Allah Ta'ala is true by necessity. It's not true because you trust it. You don't trust Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala because trust is based upon assessment of a track record. We don't assess a track record of Allah. You can't. Okay? A prophet is deemed trustworthy and is deemed a prophet because of his miracles, not because you're assessing his prophethood. You can't assess prophethood. You're not a prophet. A doctor is only assessed by other doctors. A regular guy like me cannot assess a doctor. A mufti is assessed by other muftis. Okay? And so who is going to make an assessment of the creator? So therefore, the word of the creator must be the truth by necessity, not by trust, not by the claim that it's the truth. And the basic logic behind this is that the sifat of Allah, the attributes of Allah, are one in themselves. They're one in themselves. He is not composed of parts. And from his attributes is his speech and his action and his knowledge. Hence, all of his speech and all of his actions, actions being the creation in the world, is in accord with his knowledge. His speech is in accord with his knowledge. The reality of the world is in accord with the knowledge, with his knowledge. When speech is in accord with the reality of the world as we see it, that's what we call the truth. Like this paper is white. Okay, the word white came out of my mouth, and the paper actually is white. So that's what we call the truth. If I said that this paper is green, it's called kadhib, whether it's accidental or not. Okay, it's kadhib, it's false. It's important to this is so important to establish firmly down that the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is by necessity true. And therefore, no concept that, oh, God's tricking me. Maybe this is all a big trick. All right. Next one. This is the last one. The siege of Medina of 1919. And this is in the time of the First World War, and the city of Medina was part of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire joined the war with the Central Powers. Okay. In an attempt to weaken the Ottoman Empire, the Allies, okay, which is the French and the British, right? Who did they side with? They created the Arab Revolt. They used the grievances. They created grievances, exaggerated grievances, and the Ottomans weren't perfect at that time. Probably had some real grievances. And they provoked the Arab Revolt. And the Arab Revolt was led by a Sharif Hussein of Mecca. Unfortunately, a member of Ahl al-Bayt here is the antagonist. And the traitor of the Ummah, really. It's pretty sad. And he's the future progenitor. He is the future head of the nation of Jordan. They gave him as a consolation prize. He was the chief of Mecca. See, here's the thing. He plotted against the Ottomans. They used him to plot against the Ottomans. When they didn't want him later on, when the Saudis came up, and they preferred that, they bumped him off. And they sent him and his lineage, and they gave him a consolation prize, which is called the nation of Jordan. Okay? Not even a nation. It's just like a plot of land. All right, let's just circle it and call it Jordan. And you'd be the king there. Happy? Have some toys. Take some toys, and that's yours, right? Good. So Sharif Hussein was supported by British and French agents, and this is the era of T.E. Lawrence. All right? And they started to besiege Medina, to conquer Medina. Take Medina from the Ottomans. So this is Muslims being now puppeted by the French and the British allied forces to take Medina away from the Ottoman Empire. Who's fighting back? Fakhruddin Pasha. The hero of this story is Fakhruddin Pasha. Okay. And when you get us a chance, I want to give us an image of Fakhruddin Pasha. And he resisted for 2 years and 7 months, pushing back this Arab revolt. Okay. And this started way back in 1914. A 2-year dialogue known as the McMahon-Hussein Correspondence. So you're going to side with the kuffar and you're going to fight the Ottomans. That's basically what happened. And the British offered them material support, and they said, you will have a Hashemite kingdom, a Hashemite caliphate from Aden, or Aden down here, all the way up to Aleppo. All right? Listen, when Satan makes you a promise, it's a lie. And when the British Empire makes you a promise, it's a lie. Okay? With increasing fears that the Ottomans were clamping down on these subversive Arab nationalists, Sharif Hussein staged a region-wide revolt in June of 1916. Let's put it this way. Let's say Sharif Hussein wants to revolt against the Ottomans. That's not newsworthy in a sense, because in history it's not newsworthy. But the fact that the one behind him is the British and the French, that's a problem, right? Now at that point you realize that the enemy, who is the greater enemy, should never support you against your rival. The prime objective of the initial result was to deprive the Ottomans' legitimacy of the Khilafah by taking Mecca and Medina away from them. Okay? And the Arabs began to capture Mecca against the surprised but well-equipped Ottoman defenders. And that culminated in the Battle of Mecca. Okay? And the Arabs successfully captured Mecca, all right, away from the Ottomans. The Arabs then turned their attention to Medina, which was defended by an even bigger Ottoman force, okay, complemented by the strategic Hijaz Railway. Now, listen to this. Do you want to know why the Arab world is in khizy, in humiliation? Is there one country in the Arab world that you say, I'm proud, this is an Arab country, right? Or all of them are worse than the other in some way, shape, and form? No, it's not to say that you can't go have a good time in Egypt, that there are not some great things happening. Jordan is a very peaceful place, right? It's always when you never hear of drama coming out of Jordan. There's a lot of great things happening in Jordan. But in world history, in the world stage right now, is it a place that, you know, gives you a lot of pride? I wouldn't think so. All right. I don't think so. So this is the origin. It's khiyana. The siege began in October 1916 when the Arabs, led by Hussein's son Faisal, were repulsed with heavy losses to the Ottomans, who were fortified and armed with artillery in contrast to the mobile, irregular Arab force. This would prove detrimental as the Ottomans reinforced the city with thousands of soldiers and necessary supplies. The Ottomans tried to recapture coastal ports that were used to supply the Arabs, but were foiled by the British Royal Navy. At this point, Arab and Allied planners decided to lay siege to Medina instead of forcefully breaching it. Okay. من أحدث في المدينة حدثا فعليه لعنة الله والملائكة والناس أجمعين. The Ottomans were pinned down in the city. They were pinned in a siege while desperately protecting the Hijaz Railway, the only means of supply. By pinning the 12,000 Ottomans in Medina, it would leave other fronts much easier to win, such as Palestine, Sinai, Mesopotamia, and Aqaba. This is a massive Ummah-wide Arab revolt against the Ottomans. For this purpose, Nuri Sayyid, or Sa'id, set about creating military training camps in Mecca under the direction of General Aziz Ali Elmasry, using a mix of Bedouins and Arab officers and Arab Ottoman deserters who defected to the Arab revolt. Aziz Ali created 3 infantry brigades, a mounted brigade, an engineering unit, and 3 different artillery groups made up of a patchwork of varying cannon and heavy caliber machine guns. He had a total force of 30,000 people. Okay. Aziz Ali proposed that it be divided into 3 armies: an eastern army given to Prince Abdullah ibn Hussein, okay, a southern army by Ali ibn al-Hussein, okay, and they would form around Medina, and the northern army commanded by Prince Faisal, all right, would form a cordon around Medina from the north. These armies had elements of British and French officers attached to them. That's why you know the barakah is not there. Okay, who provided technical military advice. All right, one of these officers was the famous T.E. Lawrence. Over the course of the 1917-1918 Arab revolt, the Arabs numerously attempted to sabotage the Hijaz Railway. Ottoman garrisons of the isolated small train stations withstood the continuous night attacks and secured the tracks against increasing number of strikes. There were 130 major attacks in 1917 and hundreds in 1918, including exploding more than 300 bombs on April 30th, 1918. The Arabs aided the British wherever they could. Their efforts paved the way for the British annexation of the Levant. Fools. With the resignation of the Ottoman Empire from the war, with the armistice of Mudros between the Ottoman Empire and the Entente on the 30th of October 1918, it was expected that Fakhreddin Pasha would also surrender. But he refused, and he did not surrender even after the war, despite pleas and orders from the Ottoman Sultan. Okay? And here it is. This is where this thing becomes sacred, and it becomes part of our spiritual history. After the war, Fakhruddin Pasha was walking in the middle of the night, depressed, anxious, not knowing what to do now that he had lost support of the Sultan. He sat down by one of the homes in Medina and leaned his head on the wall and thereupon fell asleep. He reported then that he saw a vision of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam reached his hand out. Fakhruddin Pasha took his hand. The Prophet lifted him up and he said, "Follow me." He walked with the Prophet 3 steps and the dream ended. Fakhruddin Pasha began then wondering on the meaning of this dream. And he realized the meaning of this dream is that he now reports directly to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, meaning that he's no longer reporting to the Ottoman Sultan, and he now works directly for the cause of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This renewed his vigor, and he was able to hold out without any Ottoman support against the British and the French and the Arab revolt for 2 to 3 more months. Okay. 2 to 3 more months he was able to hold out on his own. Okay. And he considered that dream to be a sign that he was on the right track in defending the city. Don't stop defending the city and defend it until your death. Thereupon, the British were able to buy out some of his own soldiers who arrested him. Okay. Fakhruddin, general defender of the most sacred city of Medina, servant of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is a letter. Okay. This is a letter Fakhruddin Pasha wrote to Sharif Hussein of Mecca. Okay. In the name of Allah, the Omnipotent, to him who brokered the power of Islam, caused bloodshed amongst Muslims, jeopardized the Khilafah of the Amir al-Mu'mineen, commander of the faithful, and exposed it to domination by the British. He's writing to the traitor of Mecca, the Arab revolt. Okay. On Thursday night, the 14th of Dhul Hijjah, I was walking, tired and worn out, thinking of the protection and defense of Medina, when I found myself among unknown men working in a small square. Then I saw standing before me a man with a sublime countenance. Okay? He was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His left arm rested on his hip under his robe. And he said to me in a protective manner, "Follow me." I followed him 2 or 3 paces. Okay? And then I woke up. I immediately proceeded to his sacred mosque and I prostrated myself in salah near his tomb. I am now under the protection of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is what he's saying to him. He is my supreme commander. I am busying myself with strengthening the defenses, building roads and squares in Medina. Trouble me not with your useless offers. Sharif Hussein tried to buy him out. Trouble me not with your useless offers. The battle is renewed. He refused to hand over even his sword. Okay, even upon receipt of direct order to do so by the Ottoman Minister of War. This is one of our heroes. The Ottoman government was upset at his behavior. Sultan Muhammad VI dismissed him from his post. He refused to do so and kept the flag of the Ottoman Sultan flying over Medina for 72 days after the war. After the armistice of Mudros and the closest Ottoman unit was 1,300 kilometers away from Medina, the British eventually understood that they couldn't defeat Fakhruddin Pasha with military power because he had fortified the city. Instead, they had to bribe some of the soldiers in his army. And they arrested him on the 10th of January, 1919. Abdullah I of Jordan and his troops entered Medina on the 13th of January, 1919. After the surrender, the Arab troops looted the city for 12 days. Overall, 4,850 houses were locked and put under seal by Fakhruddin Pasha. They were opened forcefully and looted. About 8,000 men of Turkish garrisons were evacuated to Egypt after their surrender. Besides the evacuated, some died of disease and others dispersed from their own into various areas. The weapons and ammunition were left to the besiegers. So, Arab revolt went against the Ottomans, used by the British, and what happens to you? What does the Prophet ﷺ say? Whoever digs a ditch for his brother, he falls into it. This is an ancient Arab saying. Yamkurun wa yamkurullah. So give it 4 or 5 years, and they're going to find a better stooge They don't want the sophisticated Hijazi people to rule. Let's get the Najdis and the Saudi King Abdulaziz bin Saud, and boom, you guys came in 1919, and you're going to be out by 1926 by the British. These people are betrayers, right? That's all they know how to do. And it's good that the legacy of this betrayal by some members of Ahlul Bayt was short-lived, so that history can't remember much of it, and most people don't even know about it. So that they don't go down in history and have a whole empire now based upon treachery. No, kafara of their sins right away. Because even the murtakib al-kaba'ir, if he's Ahlul Bayt, you should hope that they get expunged, their sins expunged, and they show up on the Day of Judgment and meet their grandfather, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, having faced their punishments in this world.